Welcome to the Faith and Fear podcast. Our goal is to help illuminate some of the more obscure aspects of the esoteric, to shed light on places that for centuries have been purposely kept in the dark. Join us as we discuss our experiences in this arena and work through the greater mysteries of life together.
And we're back, still alive and here again. Hello, Greg. Hello, Ryan.
Hey,
Hello, Michael.
Hello. Hi. Well, we're excited to take a look at the paranormal. Our good watchman here, Ryan, is well versed in this realm, holding a PhD even in the paranormal. Ryan, perhaps you can help me classify that better.
Yeah, parapsychology.
Parapsychology, even better. Thank you. And before I turn the reins over to you and learn what you have to teach, I want to mention briefly my interest in understanding the words of this realm better and how they may pertain to the very normal world in which we live in, day by day, moment by moment. And before I open up that investigation to the shamanic or the natural or the emotional, I want to share what I found on a brief little etymological adventure. A quick flyby here. I looked up the word ghost, and it is related to an Old English gast, which is breath. It's related to aghast, I'm sure, as it goes down further to something of excitement, amazement, or even fear. And of course, that's very related to spirit, which is the breath of God often. So again, ghost and spirit being linked by the breath, very interesting. And furthermore, ancestor, as we may think of the ghosts of those who have been here. The ancestor is simply one or that which has gone before. That is the simple compound word of it, to go before. So it makes me curious about the breadth of ancestry. And then thinking more about the scary side of things, the word haunt is a sense of home, a dwelling. We see this when someone, they're someone's local haunt or favorite haunt, their favorite bar. But this idea of, from the Norse, to bring home is a curious idea and seems to be related to possession or possess, which is the idea of holding or occupying, inhabiting. More to the root of it, it is a compound of having power and sitting. Possession being more related to property in the past, but this idea of a power sitting here, wherever the possession is occurring. Again, there's this picture of the dwelling. So I'm frankly a little titillated here as I'm seeing the dots connecting. And I'm very curious, Ryan, what more you have to add to this picture.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
please take it away.
Did you happen to look up the word paranormal?
Oh, of course, of course. That simple compound word, please forgive me, scientific etymologists, if compound is not the exact terminology for something with a prefix. But para simply means aside from or contrary to. So essentially, not normal, which is something I would want to reflexively challenge, because
Right.
I think this is all very, very normal as our breath is, as normal as being in possession of something or having an emotion. But I digress. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I happen to look it up too. Um looks like Oxford reference kind of breaks it down to beyond the normal.
Mhm.
And so under that definition, anything that can be considered normal can be explained by the laws of science.
Mm.
So things that cannot be explained by our current understanding of science are lumped into the term paranormal, which is, I mean, that's a shifting scale. It's kind of unfortunate because we're constantly learning more through science and new things are discovered every day. So I really think, like you said, you'd like to challenge the fact that this is not normal. I
Mhm.
think that with time, we'll be able to uncover, you know, scientific discoveries in this field, I hope. And
Yeah,
and it will be moved from, currently it's referred to as a pseudoscience, but I think that I don't think it's always going to be the case. I mean, the earth was flat until it wasn't, right? So so it's just we're still learning.
I
Indeed.
guess it's been said too that when physics is properly understood, there'll be no need for the term metaphysics.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
just don't seem to understand enough yet. Is the point, I suppose.
Right. And so I asked you guys last week if we're going to cover this topic, what are some questions that you had? And Greg, you asked, what gear do investigators use? Like, what is the standard gear? Why is it used? How is it used? Stuff like that. So I have a list. You want to go over that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm also interested in what they're measuring, but maybe that's
Yeah, yeah. I'll talk
deeper
through
into
it when I get to those. So obviously we use audio recorders. The idea behind recording audio is to hopefully capture some kind of electronic voice phenomena, EVP, and that would just be a voice or a sound that isn't coming from a living person.
gotcha.
So it requires a lot. It requires you to listen back. If you're recording the whole thing, it requires you to listen back in real time, that whole investigation. It's very time consuming, and and see if you hear anything. Sometimes it's an answer to a question that wasn't heard at the time, or uh, a name or something like that.
Yeah, I actually have a funny memory of using an EVP on one of our investigations in the past. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
it. Maybe
in
it's this
California.
one. No, this was in Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was at that one cemetery we went to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But
Um, Another popular piece of gear that investigators commonly use is an electromagnetic frequency meter, EMF. Um, so they're used to read fluctuations in the local electromagnetic fields of an area. The theory is that paranormal entities can create or have the ability to directly affect these electromagnetic fields. So researchers use EMF meters in order to help substantiate proof of paranormal activity during an investigation. So it is important to note that all living things have their own electromagnetic field. And in addition to that, electronics give off their own electromagnetic fields. So it's very important when you're using these meters to go through the location, if it's a house or outdoors or whatever, and take baseline readings of the area so that you know if you're walking through a room and you get a spike, you know whether or not that's something that's like maybe there's bad wiring, or I don't know, you know, a big fuse box or electronic panel somewhere in that room that's throwing off a lot of electromagnetic frequency.
Interesting. Um, I'm curious. You mentioned that every being creates its own individual EMF.
Right.
Uh, so I'm reminded that during my times of trying to be a good hippie, I came across the story of, that frequency emanating from the heart and it
Hmm.
having a substantially large field. Is is this your understanding of its generation point? And I'm also curious if you know anything about the rest of that story of the heart's frequency.
Um, so I'm not positive. I do know I've seen some diagrams, and it looks like almost like a donut that's kind of emanating around a
Mhm.
person. It's strange, but if you could see it, that's what it kind of looks like in
Mhm.
how the energy moves.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So, should also cover that some people, myself included, are more sensitive to electromagnetic fields. So, being in close proximity to a high electromagnetic field can give symptoms of nausea, dizziness, headaches, even audio or visual hallucinations. And sometimes these symptoms experienced by people who are sensitive to them can be mistaken for paranormal phenomena. Um, so if you're if you only have experiences in this one bedroom, you know, if it's at night and you've been in there for a long time, say you're sleeping there for hours and you're sensitive to it, you can wake up and have what you feel like is a paranormal encounter, but it's really just you reacting to being in this unshielded environment with too much electromagnetic frequency.
Hmm. Good to know.
So if we go into a location and I'm doing the baseline sweep and I find that there's a room that's like really hot, I can just let the person know like, hey, this might be, you know, even before the investigation starts, like, hey, this might be the issue. Um, maybe talk to an electrician.
Mhm.
The house's wiring is really bad.
Mhm. Interesting.
Um,
I'm further curious
yeah.
as I try to track the story of heart frequencies. I'm wondering if those who are experiencing a sensitivity to EMF may also be more sensitive in an empathic sort of way. I'm wondering if I think that would require some further research, but I'm curious if that's been your personal experience also.
I don't know if I've ever I don't know if I've ever thought of that. It makes sense to me. Um, yeah, it would definitely be something that would be cool to study.
Hmm. Noted. Thank you.
Yeah. All
I
right.
guess we have to,
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
oh, it's just seems like we'd have to define empath.
Yeah, it's not my
And
favorite word, but the essence of feeling another's feelings.
Yeah.
While I prefer
well,
the other, you know,
I
compassion.
guess I mean like the mechanics of how that would work and how I could relate to what Ryan's talking about. I'm sure there's a connection there, but
Mhm.
yeah, terms. Anyway, I'll shut up.
No, you're good. Another cool piece of tech that some people have access to, it's getting a little bit more affordable now, are FLIR or thermal cams. Um, they used to be very expensive. Consumer grade ones are coming down in price, but it's basically, you know, just like you see in the movies, it's a thermal imaging camera. It can show you in real time cold spots or heat signatures. They're super useful, really cool. I'm a tech geek, so I thought, you know, they were just super cool when I saw, what was it? Oh, the first Jurassic Park, the kid with the night vision goggles. I wanted a
Mhm.
pair of those so bad. So like anytime I can get my hands on a new piece of tech, it's like, ooh, it's like Christmas. I get to see. Uh, yeah.
Did you ever get a pair of
Did
those goggles?
you- No.
Still on the wish list?
Still, yeah. Someday.
Hopefully before the Velociraptors come.
Hopefully.
Velociraptors.
Yep. Paranormal Velociraptors. Kind of along the same line as the thermal imaging, but significantly cheaper, is just a basic infrared thermometer. Kind of has a laser pointer, and it'll show you a pinpoint spot, wherever you're pointing at, to show you what the temperature is. We use those because one of the theories in kind of paranormal activity is that there will be temperature drops or variations. Generally, things will get cooler. So if we can get baseline readings, the room's 65, and then all of a sudden it drops to 50, we can kind of, correlate data and try to get as many different readings as possible to coincide with something that we would see or experience. That's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because it's just interesting point that it gets that you get these cold spots. I don't know what that says about what's happening with the energy there, but
The theory would be that, or at least one of the theories is that to interact with the physical, it requires a tremendous amount of energy, and that would be pulled from the surround. So it's super common, like we would leave our extra batteries outside of the location, like in our cars, because it's super common for your tech to get drained. So trying to record or use EMF meters or anything, and then having your batteries constantly die, it's just it's super frustrating.
sure.
But it's super common. It's like it's laughably common, and that's the only thing that that we can kind of point to, is that something's going on here. It's trying to pull extra energy from the area, and it'll just drain things, including temperature.
Mhm. Well, that's really interesting, especially when
Yeah.
we get into talk about the elements. It seems like a really interesting relationship between fire and ether.
Yeah.
But talk for later, I suppose.
Yeah. We use motion sensor or motion activated devices, usually infrared monitors, just to kind of trigger lights, so that, because the team can't be everywhere at once, but if you can have these kind of motion activated sensors down a hallway, you can kind of spread your team out a little bit more and then hone in on an area if something's lighting up. Another thing I should note, that's not really on the gear side, is that in contrast to the TV shows that we see ghost hunters almost exclusively hunting at night, the only reason to hunt at night is if the activity only happens at night. So I think it's definitely like darkest, spooky, it's sensationalized. But if if I was doing an investigation and the client says they have activity at 2 p.m., I'm not going to show up at midnight and try to capture something, So it's really just you go when the client says that they're experiencing most activity.
That makes sense. And yet, I am curious if there is any credence to be given to the mythological stories of nighttime having a thinner veil. There's a dimensional shift of some sort when the sun goes down.
I don't know. There's definitely, I mean, people talk about 3 a.m. or the witching hour, or
Right.
like and there's definitely something, because there's more report of activity at that time, at those times generally. But it's not the rule. It's not it, I guess a lot of people believe that that's the only time that things happen, because that's what we would be shown on the ghost hunting shows or the ghost movies. But it can happen at any time of the day.
Yeah. some
it would be interesting to be able to say yes. This is the veil. We can measure it, and this is when we know. Like, I'm excited for that to be a thing someday.
for sure.
Suppose that's
But
kind of my side goal too. Figure that out.
so curious what color it is. But to be sure, as the etymology of ghost and spirit suggests, the breath is with us any time of day.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually
go ahead.
Before Michael asked his question, if you noticed any kind of difference between the phenomena during the day and during the night.
That is a good question. I don't think so. I think that if people were dealing with stuff at night, they generally thought that it was scarier. Like, I had a lot more clients would tell me that they thought they had a demon in their house if it was something that was happening at night. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I'm just thinking about like the energetics of it and the sun being out to change that. But anyway, just wondering if you noticed a difference.
Sounds like good science could be done there, and having to calculate the human error of predisposition.
Yep.
Tough one.
Another cool piece of gear is... Oh, sorry. We have more?
Oh, I was good. I'm sorry. I was going to ask if there's any other tech. Please continue.
Yes, there is. It's called an SLS camera, a strained layer superlattice camera. It basically... if you've ever seen Xbox Connect,
I think so.
The thing that like charts your movement and you can do like little dancing games and stuff. That's an SLS camera. It throws an infrared grid out in front of itself and then uses that grid to map out humanoid figures. So if it points it at me or you, it would make a little stick figure man on your screen, mapping our movements. So we use those because there's been a theory, I think it goes back probably to the early 80s, is that this paranormal activity is happening in a light spectrum that we can't see, or that most people can't see. So a lot of investigators use infrared or ultraviolet or even full spectrum cameras. So this SLS is kind of an infrared deal, and basically you would use it in a room without people in it, and then if you saw a stick figure man walking across the room, you might have something on camera. It's a pretty cool piece of equipment, but it is also susceptible to error because it's still pretty new. Obviously we use video cameras and still cameras. A lot of handheld camcorders have night vision options, and you can get infrared illuminators to kind of boost that. So if you are doing an investigation at nighttime, you can still have good quality visuals. I used to use, like in my early days of investigation, I used to use a still camera with film. Like I developed the film myself. And in that case, I would use infrared film, which was pretty cool. One item that I don't use very often, I have used in the past, but I don't know, I have mixed feelings on it. It's called a spirit box or a ghost box. It's a device that is rigged to constantly scan radio stations and not stop on any one station. And it kind of creates this background layer of white noise. And then you can basically do a kind of a Ouija board style question and answer type of thing. And then sometimes, or the theory is that an entity could use that white noise to talk back to you. So you'd say, "Why are you here?" And then it would, stop on a station for a moment that said like "stuck," and is that an answer or is that a coincidence? I don't know. It's definitely gimmicky in my opinion. It looks very cool on a big screen in Hollywood, because if you can get those cool kind of responses, it definitely makes it seem real. Does that make sense?
It does. And
But it's something that some teams use. So some people like it.
yeah, it definitely has an appeal because it's giving you something all the time instead
Right.
of silence.
Yeah.
And it also does risk attribution errors, just as you're talking about with the Xbox Connect device that is looking
Right.
for humanoid figures, that if you are programmed or if the program is looking for something in particular, it will skew results to try to fit it. As the old saying
Right.
goes, give a man a hammer and all he'll see is nails.
Yeah, it is definitely hard to leave kind of confirmation bias behind
Mm-hmm.
when you go into an investigation because you want so badly to
Mm-hmm.
catch something, right? I mean, that's always the goal, is to be able to say, we found proof, we got it right here. And even, I mean, I've taken some pictures in the past and you've seen them.
Mm-hmm.
I got trashed online when I posted those.
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop fake, you're lying. Like, so even when you have things that are like, this is it,
Mm-hmm.
you just get, people don't believe you. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. There's a whole lot more on the gear side. But there is not, we don't live in the era of science where it's like the Ghostbusters and we have a device that specifically measures the energy that a ghost has, like the PKE meter, or a trap that can, that can eliminate the ghost from a house. That's, we're not there yet. I
No
don't know if we'll ever
Luigi
be there.
vacuums?
No Luigi vacuums, no proton packs. The EMF meter is as close to a PKE meter as it gets, and even that is total theory. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we could find out in 10 years from now that that paranormal has nothing to do with the electromagnetic frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been it's been a theory for a lot of years, and it's just another tool in the kit that can kind of help you point to whether or not there might be activity.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, uh, quick thing to add. Now that you've mentioned confirmation bias and um, scientific process, a scientific principle that I've been trying to incorporate into my daily predisposition to magical thinking is uh, trying less to prove myself right as much as trying to prove myself wrong as a scientific practice.
Okay.
And which is I think I'm curious how you may be, what other scientific principles you are aware of and the practice, and also to turn our look here to you and your experience and what in the world parapsychology means. Like your scientific background and endeavor, if you will.
Scientific background would really just science has never been a huge strong point of mine, but paranormal has always been a big passion. So yeah, so the parapsychology, I'm sorry, were you wanting a definition?
Oh, no, more so just curiosity again for scientific principle or practice that you've found to be helpful in your work. And also, I suppose, yes, I apologize. Yes, a working definition of parapsychology, please.
Yeah, so parapsychology is just a field of study concerned with the evidence and investigation of the paranormal. Um, as far as scientific approach to it, um, I think debunking has a bad reputation in the paranormal field because a lot of people will go in and just try to discredit or so in some cases even humiliate the people that might be experiencing this paranormal activity. But at the same time, you always want to go in, and if something can be explained, naturally, it needs to be explained in that way. So if you find that there's bad wiring, or there's a gas leak or something, you're not going to feed into their hope or delusion that there's a ghost in their house. You kind of can explain it in a way where it's not paranormal, but you still help them.
And it makes me wonder about the psychology part to your work, because it sounds like you've been doing it kind of organically, insofar as taking into consideration your customer or your clientele's psychology in the experience, and being considerate to that as well. Is that a part of the picture?
Yes, but I'm not a psychologist. Is that? I mean, that's important to say, right?
Of course.
So definitely making sure that the people are in a good place and are comfortable. That's the big goal. Is at least my big goal is for people to be comfortable in their own homes. So if I can explain what they're dealing with, if I can help them understand that, usually that is a huge step in the right direction for their comfort.
Yeah, maybe as like a supplemental view here, it seems to me like the parapsychology as like a field of study and a practice is a lot like private investigation. So instead of it involving a bunch of sciences, you're using critical thought and deductive reasoning, using a few tools to come to your conclusions rather than, specific measurements and equations and stuff.
Right.
So
Where I wish
value.
that there were specific measurements. We could say, "Oh, we got a 3. It's a ghost." but
Right.
unfortunately, we're not there yet. So we do have to use, a lot of that deductive reasoning. A lot of, okay, we got a spike on the EM, we got a temperature drop, we got an EVP, we got this flickering light. All of this happened at the same time that we heard this thing. Like, if we can line up as many things as possible, then we can point towards, yeah, that was genuinely a paranormal occurrence.
Yeah, and I guess I was trying to say that seems to be what the value is in general. Is you're trying to get out of very little as much as you can, and as far as like a practice and stuff like that, it's that's a discipline in its own. Just in general, is to keep that critical thought, that open mind, and even though the forces you're dealing with are really subtle, you're trying to examine them in as disciplined a way as you can.
Right.
Yeah, I hear that being an answer to a previous question about the scientific principles at work here, because the scientific method is just a framework for the investigation of what in the world, WTF.
Right.
Let's investigate this.
Yeah.
Since the dawn of time. What in the F?
What is happening here? Yeah. All right. Another question that you guys asked are, what are the different types or classifications of paranormal activity? You want to talk about that?
Oh yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about the survival hypothesis. Is a theory that states that a person's personality and or consciousness survives the physical death of the body. Accordingly, humans have a dual nature, a physical body and an ethereal aspect that contains the personality and consciousness. This ethereal aspect has been called the soul, spirit, and higher self, among many others. And many theories exist to support the survival hypothesis, including the first law of thermodynamics, also known as the law of conservation of energy, which states energy can be changed from one form to another, but cannot be created or destroyed. Thus, the total amount of energy in the available in the universe is constant. So if humans are energy and energy can't be destroyed, then what happens when we die? So we really don't know, but we do have theories, and some people believe that we can stick around after we die. So there's different types of we'll call them hauntings, and we're going to kind of break those down. We have residual hauntings. A residual haunting is most easily defined as paranormal activity at a given location that does not interact with living beings in any way. These hauntings almost play out like a recording. One of the leading theories from parapsychologists is that because the Earth is basically a giant magnet, and that highly energetic or emotionally charged events can be recorded or imprint onto a location, kind of in a similar way that magnetic tape can be used for audio or visual recordings, like cassette tapes, VHS. These hauntings, in quotes, hauntings can be disturbing, but ultimately cannot cause any harm because we're just seeing a replay. So this would be the classic, the old house on the hill is haunted, and at midnight on Halloween, the scary guy walks down the stairs with an axe, but it only happens at that time, right? So that would be a residual. If it happens, and it always happens in the same way, the old lady walks across the room and sits in a chair, that's basically stuck on a replay loop. There's no intelligence there. It just happens.
And very interesting, if I may note, the element of emotionally charged gives a point to the hippie heart story.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be positive or negative emotions. So it's definitely, you'll hear more stories about the horrible suicide and the haunted place because of that than the kid that was so happy that they got a puppy, that there's like this happy kid playing with the puppy ghost, like, but they do happen both ways. I think by and large we just kind of remember or dwell more on the negative stuff, just as humans. I don't know why.
Oh man.
Another type is called an intelligent haunting. And intelligent hauntings involve spirits or entities that can interact with living beings. They're usually benign. These entities can be disturbing as they can directly interact with us in our day-to-day lives. Some believe that these spirits could remain earthbound because of many different reasons, including they have unfinished business. They are unaware that they are no longer living. They feel compelled to remain behind to look after loved ones. They desire to see justice served for a wrong committed against them. They fear the unknown of the other side. There's a long list, but if the goal is to help these entities move on, and you can figure out what that unfinished business might be, you can in some cases help them.
Interesting. I have to, for the sake of keeping the heart story up in the air, if I may note the etymology of emotion, because this is something a constellation I keep seeing here. The idea of perhaps a haunting or a ghost or a spirit being emotional in nature. This is a premise I'm looking to advocate, that the essence of the word emotion is to move out. That it's a curious thing that I'm seeing a loose picture of the emotion moving out and away from wherever it may be stuck, and it enacting something, intelligently or not. But maybe also because I watched Inside Out last night with family.
That's a good one.
The intelligence of these emotions as these little personalities themselves that is the same personality in us all that is looking to move something out into the world. Again, I digress. Thank you.
I'm getting deep there.
All right. Another classification is the spooky, scary kind, malevolent, inhuman spirits or demons. They are much more rare than the early examples. Some believe that inhuman spirits can or do have the ability to interact with the living. This is almost always experienced in negative ways. Theory is that they can feed off negativity or negative emotions, and because of this, they have a desire to cause those types of circumstances in the people that they are quote unquote haunting, in order to kind of feed off of that. Now, demon is a hot topic, a hot button word. So I think some of the community has moved on to calling them malevolent, inhuman spirits, but the idea would be that this is a being that has never walked the earth as a human, and it is something else. Some cultures call them trolls or sprites or elementals. I've worked with a practicing Wicca, and a indigenous shaman, and they both had their own kind of theories, but this was kind of always pointing back to this thing was never a human, and is basically just here to feed off of chaos. Much less common to see, but it's still something that's out there, and definitely a reason that people have a fear of the paranormal would be this type of haunting.
And the rarity of this scenario, this classification, is interesting to me because indeed the heat, the hot topic around demon, in that conversation, the heat of that conversation is the same around evil.
Yeah.
And there are so many interesting perspectives and opinions about evil. But one of the stories I'm remembering from a biblical context is this idea. Maybe I have my contexts mixed up. I'm curious about the origins of it. But as the story goes, evil cannot create. Voldemort shows us this. So there we have the image of the vampire or the parasite, or even the zombie that is needing to feed on a living essence, on those that do create. And there are so many other strange stories that speak to this idea of feeding on the energy. And again, for the hippie heart story, feeding on the emotional energy, even. Very, very interesting to me.
Yeah. All right. The last type of haunting or paranormal activity that I'm going to talk about today, there's lots more, but these are kind of the four main ones, is a poltergeist activity. It is also referred to as recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK. So the word poltergeist, let's get a little etymology here for you, Michael, it translates to noisy ghost. So this type of haunting includes objects being thrown or moved across the rooms, doors slamming, dishes being broken, windows or mirrors breaking, lights flickering on and off. It's the classic, ghost in the house. If you think of old ghost movies, it's the dishes flying off the shelves and stuff like that. This is my favorite type of haunting, if that's weird to say, because it's not a haunting. It's very exciting. The theory right now, and one that I have, is poltergeist activity isn't a haunting at all, but is an unintentional display of latent psychic phenomena. What's super cool about this is that nearly every time I have encountered a client or a family who thinks that they're dealing with poltergeist activity, I find that this family, like 9 out of 10 times, has an adolescent teen in the home who is having a hard time dealing with transitioning into that new life of being in high school, of being a teenager, and all that entails, all the emotions and everything that is going. Generally, a good kid, but wants to. They want to break a dish. They're frustrated, and they lash out. They don't realize they're slamming the door, but they're slamming the door. They're breaking the mirror. They're breaking the window because they're just screaming in their head, right? But they're a good kid. They don't want to go break it, break the thing. So it's definitely more delicate to handle because now you're bringing in a kid, a minor, and you're kind of trying to talk to the family like, hey, I don't think your house is haunted. I think you need to talk to your kid.
Yeah, without blaming anybody, good luck.
Right.
We're being received blame. Boy.
Right. And sometimes they're like, get out, get out of my house, you kook. But sometimes they're really receptive to it. And in all cases that they're receptive to it and they start talking to their kid, or their kid's able to get into therapy or work through whatever struggles they're having, that poltergeist activity stops.
Whoa.
Very interesting.
It's super cool. And it's definitely, I mean, Greg and I have spent a good amount of time, sitting in front of things, trying to move them with our minds, like as silly as that sounds, to varying levels of success. But yeah, the idea that these, psychokinetic gifts do exist in humanity, and sometimes if you have enough pent up emotion, you can just kind of lash out psychically, and I think it's pretty fascinating.
This is outrageous. Stranger
Right?
Things live. X-Men live. That
Totally.
is, and all these things.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
a peaked emotional experience.
Yeah.
That triggers these latent abilities.
Right.
Wow. And you got a sincere gasp from me when mentioning the teenagers, because before you even went there, I was imagining the poltergeist display as if it was a teenager having a temper tantrum.
Exactly.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting. Sometimes I can read, like, right now I'm not investigating actively, but in the past, we'd get a client, and whoever took the phone call or screened the email or whatever, I'd get the idea, I'd get the write up of what's going on, and I can read like door slamming in the middle of the night, bathroom mirror broke, like all these things. I'm like, oh, I bet they have a teenager in their house. And then sure enough, they've got a teenager in the house. And then we still, we'll still do an investigation like it's something else. But if you do the investigation and you see nothing because the family's not in the house, or they're, somewhere else, and then you bring the kid back in and now there's activity again, it's like, okay, well, it's not grandma. It's your sixth grader.
I had joked in the past about you being a social worker with ghosts, but this is absolutely a piece of social work. We
Yeah.
definitely need some collaboration work is to be done here. It's
That'd
outstanding.
be cool.
I guess that
So
says a lot about those teenage years.
Yeah, it's a crazy time for kids, especially today. Like it's so much different than we were kids. It's craziness.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was kind of the basics of the stuff that you guys had asked. I don't know if you have any other questions.
I wanted to bring up that story I was about to when you're talking about EVP, the electronic voice. What is it now?
Electronic voice phenomena.
Okay, yeah. We were out an investigation a while ago at this cemetery that had been basically abandoned for a while. It was barely maintained, but anyway, because of that, there were some headstones on the ground that were like grown over with grass, so you couldn't see them.
Mm-hmm.
But I was walking around. It was the middle of the night, so I couldn't see anything. And I was walking around, and I accidentally stepped on one of the headstones. And I remember saying something like, "Oh crap!" And anyway, just thought that was it. But continued on with the rest of the investigation. Then went back. We were sitting
Mm-hmm.
at the table listening to that EVP, and I know what the moment was because I said something like, "Oh crap!" And anyway, right when I stepped on that headstone, there was I mean, it was kind of clear. I heard a voice say, "Ow."
Ow. I remember that. That's so funny.
Yeah, and it was super clear on the recording, but that's
We've had
so,
some interesting EVPs throughout the years. Remember when we were investigating at that church
mhm.
in California?
Yeah.
We had that woman's voice speaking in Spanish. You remember that dialogue? It was like 3 sentences in Spanish.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
weird.
the craziest one there was with those with the kids. We were in like the
Yeah,
playroom.
yeah.
That was pretty intense. I felt like I
My
interacted with things a lot more then.
We investigated at a church. The church had lots of reports of activity, and on one day, all of their daycare staff quit at the same time because they saw an entity walk down all of the adults running the thing saw an entity walk down the hall through the whole length of their deal, and they all quit at the same time. So we did a good amount of investigation there and saw some really interesting stuff.
But anyway, I just wanted to share that story. It's kind of funny. It's my favorite paranormal story so far. Ow.
Yeah, and a sweet little fable of why you don't step on
Yeah,
graves.
be respectful, man. Come on.
It hurts.
Not cool. Ow. That's their head. It's their headstone.
I don't want anybody to feel that way.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you both for sharing your experience. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your expertise, your knowledge.
Oh, yeah, I should have prefaced this. I'm not the end all authority. I have got 20 plus years of experience, but I just it's all no one's the authority. It's all theory. We just
Mhm.
do our best to kind of help the people that we can. So I'm hoping that one day, you know, I'm a huge Ghostbusters nerd, and I think that that's probably the reason that I was interested in this in the first place. The movie came out the same year I was born, so I was a kid when the cartoon came out, and I've always been fascinated by it. So if I could have a real life PKE meter like they have in that movie, I'd probably just die with a grin on my face. Like I don't know if I could be bummed out if I had a real device to show me where a ghost was. So someday, hopefully, we get to see that. But until then, we have, these things that can help point in the direction of a ghost, but not, um, not definitive.
Well, I learned a lot from everything you said there. It
Right
was
on.
really,
Yeah, we can
yeah.
go into this deeper. There's so much more gear to cover. And there's new stuff being developed all the time. Almost all of this stuff started out as being used for some other application, and then we just kind of say, hey, this might work for ghosts, or hey, so now there are EMF meters being developed by ghost hunting, quote unquote, ghost hunting stores or whatever. But you can also just go to Home Depot and get one from the electrician section.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot of gear that's being co-opted from other professions.
I mean, I guess that's what a lot of field jobs like that do anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the way you're using it. It's very interesting what you're looking for. and
Right.
paying attention to. Because, I mean, in my opinion, this is a excellent foot in the door to a conversation about the human presence and
Mhm.
all the things that go unmentioned about how important it is we understand our presence in the world and how much of an effect it has if we don't, or how much of a positive effect it could have if we do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Indeed. And I'd like to add that I wish when I was getting my BS in psychology, my BS in BS, I like to say, I wish we had covered things of this nature, because this is, I don't think, contrary to psychology, but expanding upon it. And I'm very interested in continuing this in a part 2 into the further cutting edge that you're aware of, and to what this has, what clues are here about our lives, our ancestors, our emotions,
Cool.
everything else Greg just said. So,
What
I
he
want to build
said.
these. I want to build this PKE meter and the trap and the laser
Oh,
gun. I
dude,
want to.
if I could have a proton pack and run around, if I could not be in construction and actually be a Ghostbuster, I'm pretty sure that would check all my boxes.
Wow, I think we're gonna get there.
Yeah,
We're
we'll
gonna
get
think.
there. Well, this has changed from an esoteric podcast to a Ghostbusters fan podcast.
Wow, it just appears that way on the outside.
Yeah,
it's a good
subtle.
cover.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you for keeping that dream alive, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Thank
Never
you for
give
sitting.
up.
Never give up. Thank you for sitting at the Watchman's table with me. We'll keep on
Certainly.
watching, even the things we cannot see.
Good talking to you guys again. Till next time, keep watching.